for joining us, everyone. I'm delighted to be facilitating our first Innovation in Giving panel, and delighted to introduce you to our panellists. I'll let them do their own introductions. So very delighted that Rachel Klausner is here, all the way from Boston. So Rachel is CEO and founder of Millie. We also have Bonnie Takhar, who's joining us, who is CEO and founder of LetsBab. And joining us shortly, he's just been delayed slightly, is David Craig, who some of you will know from the corporate board and has recently joined as one of our trustees. So Rachel, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi everybody, I'm so excited to be here. So maybe I'll tell you a little bit about Millie. My background before Millie was in startups. I spent some time actually volunteering on a youth village, and that's where I started my love for nonprofits and fundraising, and it was great. But then ended up in the startup world for about 8 years, mostly on the software kind of product design side. And then founded Millie a little less than 2 years ago. Millie is a platform for giving. We democratized this thing called donor advised funds. I actually am not sure if you guys have something similar in the UK, but it's basically like a giving account, and it's targeted at kind of like very high net worth individuals. It's like a whole tax situation, and it also is just like an easy way to do it. So we've actually kind of tried to break that glass ceiling and open that up to everybody. So now instead of like a $10,000 minimum to open one up, we have a $20 minimum. And so that's our initial, how we're built. And our big focus right now is on corporate giving. So enabling any size company to start workplace giving and volunteering programs with technology. So excited to be here.
Thank you. And Bonnie?
I'm very excited to be here as well. Thank you for having me. So I'm actually quite the opposite to Rachel in that I started my life in a very commercial world and running luxury fashion businesses and selling shoes. I'm known as the shoe dog in the industry. And while I was at Jimmy Choo, then I was at Charlotte Olympia, and while I was running those businesses, we obviously saw the rise of influencer marketing and brands paying a lot of money towards influence to promote their brands. So over the course of me observing distribution channels and marketing channels, when I left Charlotte Olympia, felt that there was room in the market for a platform which is now known as LetsBab, which is basically a platform. It's a digital mall where you can go in and shop for yourself. While you're shopping for yourself, you might come across products that your friends and family would like. You recommend the products through the platform to your network. If they buy from your recommendation, you actually get a cash commission into your bank account or into your PayPal account. What you do with that commission is up to you. You can keep it, you can part donate it, or you can donate it fully. So the philosophy behind the platform is that everybody's voice counts and everyone should be rewarded for their taste and their lifestyle. When you go across the platform and you see all the brands, you'll see household names, luxury brands, from Body Shop to Glossier to Matches to Farfetch. We have everybody on the platform. And we really believe that the voice of recommendation should be democratized. Everyone should be rewarded for their lifestyle and their taste and fashion. But whilst we're doing this, we also want to bring social responsibility to the way you shop, change the way you shop. It doesn't always have to be this transaction of buying and wanting material things. You can give back so easily through the platform. Whilst LetsBab is a marketplace for brands, it's not just fashion, it cuts across all consumer. It's a very, very curated platform for charities. So we work very closely with the charities as we're doing today, and we don't just accept any charity on the platform. We work with them, we try to align what the objectives are, what our mission is, what their mission is, and see how we can come together in order to provide a diverse group of charities for our users. what we found in talking to most of our charity partners, typically speaking, a company or a brand will have their charity of their choice, and all of their strategic efforts are guided towards that charity partnership. What's great about LetsBab, it's truly democratic in that the user decides what charity is close to their heart, how they feel aligned to that specific charity. So our job is bringing these partnerships on board, exposing the mission of the charities to our users, and then allowing the users to decide independently how they want to donate. And the mechanism of donation is so simple that there isn't, sometimes you can find in charities that, users or donators, they feel they need to donate more. On our platform, you can donate 50 pence, you can donate £50, you can donate whatever the amounts that you want. So it's very, very flexible in that way. So in a nutshell, that's what LetsBab is, and charity is actually one of our 3 pillars.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, Bonnie, staying with you, I'll ask you the first question, and then Rachel will ask you the same question. Your products and platforms have clearly been developed with a lot of insight and market research, and that's something we really try to do when we're designing new innovation projects here at Gosh. What have you learned about your audiences that has surprised you, and what new insights have you gained?
So I think, insights and market research, I think for startups are, also quite, it's challenging in the sense that, you're starting off with a new platform, you have a certain pool of your user base, and it can be challenging to get scale of data to really understand what's happening in the beginning, early days of the platform, which I'm sure Rachel also probably finds. But what I think is really valuable is the testing, the user testing of different aspects of your platform in the early days, and understanding what community groups you're targeting, and really trying to get as many users engaged in what you're doing in terms of understanding how to build your platform going forward. And I think that's really, I would say that's been, it's an obvious thing, and I think anyone sort of launching a digital strategy will probably know this, but I can't underscore the value of it enough, because the feedback that you get, and in terms of insights and what surprised us, is whilst I said that charity is very much one of our core pillars of the platform, what surprised me the most was that the percentage of donations that users were actually donating, and the demographic around those donators. I would have thought that a more mature demographic would be probably donating a bit more, and actually they weren't, and it was the younger user group that's donating, and they actually donate about 50% of their earnings from the platform. So those were the 2 insights for us.
Wow, fascinating. Thank you. I'm delighted that David Craig has now joined us. Hello, David.
Hi, Nina. How are you? Yeah,
good, thank you. Do you just want to introduce yourself to everyone? I think most people know you, but there might be some on the line that don't.
Sure, yeah, sorry I'm a little bit late. I was just coming out of a board meeting. I'm CEO, founder of Refinitiv. We're a 6 billion, 18,500 fintech based on the origins of Reuters, operating in 190 countries. We're at the heart of financial markets and money moves and transfers. And then I also happen to be on the corporate and the trustee of the Gosh board and an investor in several forgiving charitable foundation platform. So delighted to be on the panel with Bonnie and Rachel, and looking forward to speaking and taking part of this panel.
Great, thank you for joining us. And a reminder to the audience, if you have any additional questions you come up with whilst we're talking, please use Slido and the hashtag #BigPanel. So Rachel, going back to the insight that you've learnt about your products, what's been the most surprising one for you?
Oh my gosh, a lot. Some have been obvious, like things that we know about donors. They're very reactive around any sort of world event or disaster, there's always like a huge spike in giving around that area. But one thing that we didn't anticipate was how much people don't know where to give and how many young people are really dependent on, they're waiting for their peers to give them a suggestion or to run in a 10K and be fundraising or ask them online or whatever it may be. And so what's very exciting is that a lot of young people are kind of like open to finding that, you know, 1 or 2 or 3 charities that they are going to commit to through their lifetime. Whereas like in previous generations, usually it's kind of an obvious one that your parents supported, or it's something very close to you in your community. Like we're seeing young donors give much more broadly, and also much more, you know, they're much more open to new ones. So I think there's like a real opportunity with young donors that we're seeing, and that's what's been the most surprising, is just how open they are to donating.
And David, the same question for you.
Yeah, so what surprised us? I mean, I guess a couple of contexts of this. We're all, you know, we should all be surprised by this environment that we're living through, but maybe not surprised, because a lot of the trends that we've seen happening have frankly just been accelerated by the COVID crisis. So, you know, I don't think I'm telling anyone something they don't know, which was we've rapidly moved to a cashless society. I can't remember when I last touched a £5 note. And so the whole area of physical giving is kind of over. You know, handing out buckets and waiting at the tube station for coins to come in isn't going to work. And what we're seeing in the charities that are embracing digital platforms to get some of those funds are the only ones that are going to survive. And you're doing that at a time when, you know, the demands are much higher, of course, with the impact on society and jobs and the vulnerable. This is just a terrible storm. I wouldn't even call it a perfect storm. I'll call it a terrible storm. I think that what I was just listening to what Rachel was saying about people sort of needing a momentum or a spike to move, in that what we've seen with for good causes, which I'm quite involved in, is that you do need to work hard to attract people to a cause, but once you get them to attract, then it starts to flow. In fact, Great Ormond Street is one of the causes that they support, and they've already started to see, I think, several £1,000s early days flow from the platforms they've created, which is basically repurposing loyalty points, loyalty cards, into charities like Gosh. But there is still a lot of reactance, even though the business model is obvious, the need is there. They're finding that they have to work hard on the marketing of hearts and minds of why give, why now, and why do it, when, you know, it's obvious we're all sitting on these, you know, billions of dollars, literally billions of dollars of unused loyalty points and air miles. I mean, what are we going to do with our air miles now? They're sitting there on the balance sheet of these companies as a cost, and actually giving them for free cost you nothing. But there's still huge inertia for what seems obvious. Now maybe they're going to get through that inertia or just start flowing through, but it's been surprising and somewhat frustrating to get through that inertia.
Cool, thank you. And unfortunately we can't avoid it, can we? So the next question is around COVID, and how have your operations been impacted by COVID, and how have you had to adapt and innovate in the last 6 months?
Oh, to me?
Yeah, you can start, David.
If you want, or Bonnie, I'm happy for others to go.
No, go for it.
So we called working from home, or what we call virtual operating environment, 2 weeks ahead of the UK and US government. We felt they were frankly being a little bit slow, and we basically went to 140 offices globally and said work from home. I don't think I'd ever imagined a world where that would have happened. None of us had prepared for that scenario, and the big surprise was it worked. In that the operating environment that we had, the investments that we've made in Teams and other platforms, we were able to operate 24/7 in that global environment. And so that at least the financial infrastructure has worked really well through this crisis. You know, the banks have remained operating, the payment systems are operating, everything's working. And probably thank goodness we had the financial crisis in 2007 and 2008, because a lot of money was spent on making sure resilience was in place. People are now exhausted. It's mentally very draining. You've got the added challenge of balancing kids at home sent home because there's an outbreak, caring for parents, 14 hours on video conferences. Am I sleeping at home or working in the office? I'm not sure anymore. So it's not easy. We actually just implemented today a 1 hour free a day in different time zones, and actually have told everyone to just take an hour off and don't have any meetings and do what the hell you want. Yoga, walk the dog, go for a run. Because we're recognizing that the mental strain of our 18,500 employees is pretty high, and it's going to be a tough winter. The good news is Asia, our China offices have been back actually. We've got about 30 offices around the world open. Asia and that part of the world is gradually going back, but Europe and the US in particular, it's going to be much longer haul.
Really interesting initiative. Nice. Rachel, the same question to you.
Yeah, we've already been a small distributed team, so for us on the team level, it was actually really easy. On the actual sales level, it was really crazy. I think the first few months there was this like initial short-term impact where we were selling this workplace giving software to companies. We had a bunch of pilots set up to launch actually on April 1st. And all the pilots basically got canceled because almost all of them had huge layoffs or had like major budget cuts. It was the first few weeks of COVID here, at least here in the US, that we recognized COVID, where we just, nobody knew what was going to happen. So everything paused. Like selling wasn't really happening. Things were not moving. And so that was really scary. I was like, we got to just cut costs, save money I was doing what everyone else was doing. We got to save enough money so that we can outlast this. But then with everything that happened with the George Floyd murder and Black Lives Matter in the US, it was like the first time I've ever seen in the US companies, not just like social impact focused companies, but really across the board, companies were making statements and they were having action plans and they were deciding to make some sort of impact of focus of 2020, right? They realized and looked back and said, you know what, we're in a pandemic. There's so much racial inequity in this country. Like, we need to do something. And so we went from being everyone was quiet to like tons of inbound requests to launch programs like within a week. It was like, it really became this very polarizing experience for our team because we were like writing content, like doing all the things where you lay low. And then it was like, nope, on board. So it's just been a wild year for us. I think the combination of COVID and Black Lives Matter in the US, at least, it really sparked a lot of discussion amongst companies wanting to do something. And so I think for us, it was kind of this like weird like uptick of sales. But yeah, I think in general though, like it's also hard because as we're talking to companies, many of the companies are going through like financial strain while still trying to implement giving programs. And so there's also like a lot of interesting kind of dynamic there.
Yeah, as David said, it really has been a terrible storm, but it's nice to hear that there's some pluses out of it.
Yes. Yeah, I do think that corporate giving in general and also like workplace social impact programs are going to skyrocket in the next decade or so when it really wasn't the norm prior to this.
I would agree. I think corporates have recognized they play a role in society more than before. Yeah. I think that's the theme of it, yeah.
Excellent. And Bonnie, how about in your world?
Well, a bit like Rachel, we're still in our sort of startup phase, so the team is fairly lean. But again, like we were actually about to launch our B2B pilot with a very, very big global known organization. And unfortunately, that was put on hold because of all the same reasons that Rachel's just mentioned. I think what was really, obviously we're digital, so it's fairly easy to sort of, refocus the team and keep moving. But my personal professional challenge was that I had to re-engineer my entire team, somewhat triggered by the impact of COVID and its symptoms. So I had to hire 3 new members of my team, having never met them, all through Zoom and trying to create members of a team. It was quite a lot in terms of like trying to get them. I mean, they're brilliant. Obviously, they're hired for, you know, their skills, etc. But that was quite challenging. And I think, just as David has said, I think there's fatigue. There's a lot of fatigue, and I think Zooming all day long, I think, is also having a huge impact on people. And the sector that we work, that the platform is really focused on, it's a young team, and you know, you can tell that they definitely want to get back into the office and exchange ideas and sit around and, you know, debate and banter all the business ideas that we would normally do face to face. So in terms of the business side of it, obviously, you know, we're a shopping platform. So we actually, even though there's been this sort of, you know, people have migrated more online, but not within the footwear category, the ready-to-wear category. It was home and essentials and all of those other categories that people were buying online. So we found that the business went fairly flat over March, sort of April, May, June, and then things started to pick up a little bit more. And then we also tried to bring on some more essential partnerships in terms of, like, you know, lifestyle, homeware, etc., athleisure wear, which I think we're all wearing underneath our tops right now. So yeah, we'll see. I think in terms of the digital mall, which we are, I think there are some benefits in that, in if you want a shopping mall experience, but you don't want to step into a mall because of the social distancing, don't want to wait in line. LetsBab definitely provides exactly that experience for people to be able to go thumbnail after thumbnail, just like Netflix, but you're entering in whatever brand's direct website. So we've been focusing a lot of our sort of efforts on getting that message out there.
Yeah, I think every organisation has struggled with the recruitment and onboarding of new people. I know there'll be lots of people on this call today that I've never met. And I'm missing legs. I don't know about you guys, but I'm missing legs.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, question. Let's start with you, Rachel, then, for this one. As a leader, what are the main behaviours you need to foster to get a true innovation culture?
Oh, this is a good question and a hard one. I think for us, and this is, I think also I have like a weird experience because I really never worked in like a big corporation. I've always worked for startups that have been in this innovation mindset. But I think it's really about it's about committing, but being willing to pivot really quickly. And my team knows that. We pivoted to workplace giving before we even launched out of beta. So we launched our beta. Things were great, but it wasn't the growth we wanted, and customer acquisition costs were really high. So we happened to have a few discussions with companies, and they all were like, "Oh, can you build a workplace giving tool?" We're like, no. And then we had a few more conversations, just like advisor conversations, not relating to like being a potential customer. And they all said the same thing, like, "Oh, we run these like giving things at work, and like it would be great to digitize them," or whatever it was. Different variations of that conversation happened a couple times in a row within like a week. And so we very quickly, I turned to the team. We were about to launch our product, which we still did. I said, "We're still launching this product. It's almost ready. But the second we launch, we are building out these tools for companies." And so I think, and they know in general, also when we're building out just features within products, like they know if we have, you know, I always say with my background's in design, so like we do 5 user tests per product. That's the ideal kind of best way to do it. And so we would do 5 user tests on each product and each feature. And if a bunch of conversations came back with like, "Oh, that doesn't really work," or "We don't need that," or all that, scrap the product. And so I think the team knows that that's a part of the culture. And I think if you see something not working, pivoting really quickly into something that you know or feel good about that will work, I think is really important.
Cool. Thank you. Same question to you, Bonnie.
Yeah, I would agree with Rachel. I think it's really important to be open-minded. Obviously, you know, the idea is born from passion, and as a founder, you can get really, you know, tied to the idea as you sort of dreamt about it, but the reality is something different. I think it's really, really important to have a culture where people are not afraid to speak up. They're allowed, or everybody weighs into the conversation about the product, what's not working, how we can change things. I think openness and open to listen and speed, I think, is very important in a startup environment. If you know something's not working and you've had feedback over and over again, it's really important to, we just made a decision earlier this week around paid performance marketing, and it just, you know, wasn't working for us in the way that we wanted it to. And so we had a discussion and decided to go in a different direction, although we had a couple of months of this particular plan lined up, but it's not working and it's time to, you know, move on. And I think team culture in terms of hierarchy and seniority, it's very different in the States. My husband's American, I've lived there. It's a very sort of flat hierarchy where everyone weighs in and everyone's very, you know, enthusiastic about sharing their ideas. And in England, I've bounced around a lot between the States and here. It's different, but in the businesses that I've run, or now obviously leading my own business, I definitely try to install that culture where people are very confident about sharing even the silliest idea. And making people feel comfortable about doing that, I think, is the number one. And obviously, you've hired the team because you think they're the greatest. And if they're the greatest, then everyone should be able to share and develop the product with you.
Yeah, that's really interesting as well, because I think it's a two-way thing. And I know, gosh, it's something we're working on not only empowering people, but also giving them the confidence to want to speak up.
Yes.
You can think that you're empowering them and they're still not coming up with ideas. So it's really around what's stopping them and really reassuring everyone that, you know, no idea is a bad idea. And if we start with the wild and crazy, it might spur another thought that gets us to the ideal solution in the end.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting cultural difference as well between America and UK. And David, how about you? Obviously, a much larger team and organisations that you work with. What would you say are the main behaviours you exhibit to foster a culture of innovation?
Yeah, I was listening to Bonnie and Rachel speaking and thinking there's so many things there, and actually in big organizations and large organizations are the same. One of the things we found really important is to remind people what's important. And under extreme stress, we were very clear. We went out and said, we've ripped up our strategy and our plan, form, evolve. Sustain meant look after our people, number one priority, keep them safe, and their communities. And actually that really helped and resonated with people, that we weren't just saying that we liked our colleagues and employees, that actually are looking after people. Look after our customers. And the tolerance, one thing that's really interesting in this environment, tolerance for poor service is much less than it was, and you find this across retail and B2C in the businesses I'm involved in retail, and B2B, in that whilst the systems work well, the fact that everyone's working from remote environments means that failures and issues are actually more serious. And so service has been a really, really important part of our strategy. Let's make sure we really deliver great service, systems up, systems working, and doing that in extraordinary, we've seen 5 times increase in volume of data. We're now distributing 150 billion data updates every 24 hours, just 4 or 5 times the record. So like, hammer down what's important, our colleagues and their safety and servicing our customers. And then on the agility point, our staff love doing community activity. It's a real empowerment for them. They've done a lot of innovation. We had one group created something called Ticket Aid. Brilliant idea. They basically, you know, we serve M&A bankers and traders and finance people around the world, and they often have tickets to Wimbledon or the theatre or whatever with clients, and then they have to drop it and rush off, and the tickets go to waste. So we created this auction platform where you could put the ticket in the auction platform, and then people would bid and compete to get those tickets. brilliant idea, raised £100,000 in its first year. Some of it went to Gosh, which was great. And then COVID happens, like tickets, it's just dead. And so the team got together and said, actually, we're going to rewire and convert this platform into online donations and quiz. They created the donations and pub quiz platform and then white labeled that out with our customers. And they did a terrific job of doing that so quickly. No mantra came top down. They just came up with the idea and got on with it. And they did it in their spare time, which, you know, people really love that idea of taking the capabilities of a corporation and actually adapting them to communities and doing that. And it's a great example of where agility, but across our business, you know, we've had to rip up plans. We've had to focus on things that now change. But to us, the main thing has been ensuring that people understand that our colleague safety and our client delivery is #1 priority as we get through this, and not trying to pretend that we know what the new world looks like at the end of it, because none of us have a magic crystal ball. We just have to adapt very quickly as we see trends coming out, and we can't predict it. You know, our China offices went back 3 months ago. We didn't predict that. They're now fully back at work in a sort of semi-normal environment. So we have to be very, very fluid of understanding which parts of the world in which state and how the economy and markets are evolving to do that.
Cool, thank you. Okay, so we've now got some questions that are personalised for you and your interests or your businesses. So, David, first one for you. As a critical friend, what do you think that Gosh needs to include in its strategy to become the most innovative charity in the UK?
I think it needs to be more inclusive about ideas and have a very inclusive culture. I think you've got some great people in the charity, and just having this conversation that Bonnie was saying about no idea is silly, and allowing them. I think it's got to be obvious. I'd say this more digital. You know, I think it's got a great digital foundation, but the way that payment platforms are now working, particularly in the UK and other things are happening, it's going to have to adapt very, very quickly to do that. And it's going to have to compete with the mind share in this digital world of its consumers, of why should they give to Gosh? And that's a different experience that it's going to have to deliver, and something that it's learning on how to do. And that's really important, because the competition for your 2x2 screen is very high. And so they've got to compete in that space now to do that.
Cool, thank you. Question for you, Bonnie. You have made a success of LetsBab. Can you describe a time though when you have failed, and what did you learn?
Oh God, I feel like I fail every step of the way, and every day there's a learning. Well, I think putting this all into context a little bit, you know, my background is in building luxury footwear brands. And my sort of tagline is my journey from shoes to technology. So you can only imagine the learnings along the way. But I think that one of the biggest learnings, I actually thought it was actually going to be transitioning into understanding technology and its efficiencies and optimization and development, and what that all meant. That wasn't actually my learning. I think the learnings really for me in this digital space has been the speed at which things change, the speed at which technologies change, and staying abreast of that, and you know, understanding the point of difference between what, you know, the sort of big data algorithm conversations going on versus, you know, trying to build your base and your startup in step by step. The speed is just ferocious. I came from a background where luxury, you know, it took its time. You everything you did, it was super, you know, methodical, thought through, craftsmanship, timing, marketing, pricing. It took about 6 months. Whereas with, you know, you have that approach in tech, and then it's basically game over. I think that's been the speed of being able to stay ahead of things.
Great, thank you. And question for you, Rachel. So when is Millie coming to the UK?
I was excited about this question. So it's so funny. If you would have asked me like a few months ago, I would have been like, in years. Just because of the like taking on new global markets seemed totally out of our realm. But what we're realizing is so many companies are global. So even the ones that are only a few hundred people have, global teams. And so we already have actually a whole bunch of companies on our platform that have UK offices or offices around the globe. So we're realizing that we need to implement kind of more global tools faster. And so that's something that has definitely shifted just from our customers. So soon. So right now, actually, technically, we have UK users and, they're on it. But now it's just a matter of how do we really globalize this? How do we give them, how do we show them pounds instead of dollars? And how do we, and not just for them, but like all currencies. And how do we support that at our level of tiny startup is just kind of like, those are the big questions. So hopefully soon.
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, then a question for all of you again. How do you see the model of fundraising partnerships changing in the next 2 to 5 years? And yeah, I am asking you to look in your crystal ball. Bonnie, would you like to start with this one?
Oh, it's a tricky one. So I think, both professionally and personally observing charities and the way charities go about fundraising, there've been very traditional formats. You have the galas, you have fundraising events, etc. And I think David started off touching on this. I think it dramatically needs to change. It's been the same for such a long time, not to say that it hasn't had its successes. I think I think there needs to be a massive democratization of donation giving and people feeling very comfortable that they're able to participate in whichever way possible. And I think partly LetsBab offers that because, the users can decide from, 50 pence all the way up as to what they want to donate. And I think that's been quite a barrier from my perspective that, whilst going back to the buckets at the train station being one thing, but when you go and look at where most of the fundraising is coming from and these big, massive events and people, almost sort of competing with each other at what their donation levels are going to be. I think that whole format clearly has to change and is changing, which is why we're having this conversation today. And I think, I would hope that even before the 3-year mark, there will be some radical change with different platforms like Millie's and what we're doing. And I'm sure there's, a lot that we don't know about that's going on behind the scenes. But going back to, in terms of our first conversations and partnering with Gosh and bringing LetsBab to users where they felt that they could participate in donating in a much more democratic way than feeling that it needed to be a certain amount or they need to attend an event or buy a ticket or things like that. So I think hopefully that it will change radically and be very digital, and there's so many different ways of giving. I think what's really, really important, and we found this on the LetsBab platform, if charity is a pillar of a platform or is the platform itself, the ease of giving is absolutely paramount. The privacy or the public nature is up to the platform in terms of how they want to, build that out. But I think the ease is very, very important.
Yeah, definitely. The user journey should always be like the way you start with designing.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe Rachel wants to weigh in on that.
Yeah, Rachel, same question.
Yeah, as you were saying that, I was like, oh my God, yes. Especially as a designer, so I'm definitely a very non-objective participant in this conversation. But I think one of the things that we're realizing, and there's actually a lot of data around this, is that users, customers, donors, whatever you want to call them in any scenario, they have a much lower tolerance for friction when it comes to donating, because you have a very short period of time that they are excited about giving away their money, right? They're giving that, they're getting something in exchange, they're getting the good feeling of giving, but generosity generally has a very short little period of time that you need to be able to convert them and make it super seamless. And the more points of friction that you have along that journey, that customer experience, the harder it is to convert. Whereas I think the tolerance when you're buying something for yourself is a little different, right? You have a little bit of a higher tolerance for that friction. And so I think that's something that just to think about as you're building out kind of all your digital experiences. I mean, we know fundraising is going to be pretty much like David said, it's going to be all digital soon, right? Right now it's only a portion, but even the larger donors soon are going to it's all going to be digital. And so that experience is going to be really important from beginning to end and at every touch point, right? Thinking through what is that branded experience wherever it is. And so it's going to be really interesting. I'm so curious. This year has totally, as we've seen, expedited a lot of things, digital health, like everything digitizing. And so I'm really excited to see that push amongst nonprofits to actually go out there and fully digitize the experience. And I think I'm excited to see what you guys come up with, what nonprofits come up with in general. I think it's going to be really, really interesting. And I think it's going to pave the way for the next decade. And it's going to be good.
Cool. David, you already touched on about payment systems. What else do you think is going to change?
Well, I think I'm just reflecting on the partner discussion and what Bonnie and Rachel were saying. I was saying that you're either on a platform or you are a platform. And I think the digital giving ecosystem, if I could call it that, is the same. That you'll either be using someone's platform for giving or you'll be partnering with someone on that platform. And that's where partnerships are really important, because you've got to figure out where you play in that ecosystem. Just giving that I talked about earlier is a rail. Basically, it's a set of payment rails that connect demand from consumers with a currency, which is an unused loyalty part, to charities through the financial network. And so they're partnering at both sides of the equation, and they're a link between them. And I think that's the ecosystems that we're going to see. And you asked about, what GOSH should do. GOSH should actually have a head of partnerships in that. I also think corporate partnerships are really critical. I've been on the corporate board for GOSH for now 4 years. Large institutions around the world are recognizing a few things. One is there's a demand from their employees to be seen as doing things in the community. They're also recognizing that the state has run out of money and there's only so much that they can support. And this is obviously a bigger issue. And when they talk about sustainability, it's not just about climate and other things, it's about their work in the environment and the communities that they're in. And so you are seeing that corporations are playing a much, much stronger role with charitable giving. They're doing things like running votes with their employees about which charity to support. We didn't see that 3 years ago. That's now the norm. And so how does a charity then become attractive to that corporation, display its capabilities and compete through the platforms it has? I think is a really, really important piece. I love the point about frictionless giving. The customer experience has to be completely frictionless. That's what everyone expects. Your mobile phone has now defined the experience that you want from everything. So I think that's going to be the norm, and I think charities are going to have to partner up a lot more, and also partner with each other. We have 15,000 partners on our platform, and we have over 100 people who just spend all day managing partnership relationships, and that's obviously at the big end of the scale. But even with for good causes, they have someone just dedicated to partners to onboard, manage, look after the relationship, and all those things.
Yeah, definitely interesting. Thank you. A couple of live questions coming in then. So based on what you were saying, Rachel, around how surprised you were about the age demographic of the people that we're giving, millennials and Gen Zs face record levels of debt, job insecurity and squeezed income. So how do you encourage charitable giving given these pressures?
Great question. Well, as a percentage of income, they actually give way more than all the other generations before them. Something to think about and to note. And I think something else that I always think about, I don't remember where I saw this once, but there's this picture, and I try to remind nonprofits of this, because even if they have only just a little bit amount of money right now and they're in debt and they are at the beginning of their lives, right? And there's a lot ahead of them. And we have to recognize that. So there's this great picture of Michael Bloomberg when he was in college. I think he went to Johns Hopkins. And, you know, at the time he wasn't a really big donor, but he would give like a few dollars a year and just be a part of their network. And Johns Hopkins did a really good dollar amount. So, you know, we obviously, most big universities have big major gifts departments. And Johns Hopkins, I guess, just did a really good job making sure all their alumni felt super connected. Fast forward, you see this picture. So you have this picture of him on his campus when he's like, you know, 20 and penniless. And then you see a picture of him having donated. I forgot the amount, and we need to look it up because I don't want to mess it up. But like hundreds of millions of dollars to Johns Hopkins he's given over his lifetime, if not more. And so it's just a good lesson to learn, where when you think about kind of the economics right now of the younger generations, some of their, like, all it takes is a few folks to go from just being a $5 a month donor to, okay, now I'm super involved, and you know what, my startup just made it big, or whatever, I had some, you know, big life event, and now I have all this money and I'm going to give, and that takes a lifetime. And so making sure that they feel super connected when they only have that $5 to give is the most important, right? Like, most of those people, there are so many studies that show people, it's not that, oh, you become wealthy and then you start to give. You give from a young age if you're going to give when you're a billionaire, right? So I think it's really important to think about young people as, like, each one of them has this potential to get there and to be one of your largest donors and one of your biggest supporters. And so making sure that their experience and the way they feel at that $5 level is just as important as your $1 billion donor, because that person's going to be that person. You don't know who, but they will, right? And so it's really important. So I'll send over the picture after so you guys can see. It's kind of wild, and you're like, whoa, like, that's so much money from this Michael Bloomberg, who was just a Joe Schmo at the time, and they cared about him so much as an alum, regardless of dollars, that it reflected. And Johns Hopkins is what they are because of mostly his donation. So it's really, really interesting.
That's a really nice example I hadn't heard before. Thank you. Bonnie, what would your advice be for attracting the millennials and Gen Zs?
Well, I think we sort of, not to keep plugging LetsBab on this, but I think we've sort of addressed that in the platform, whereby the way the platform is set up, the mission around shopping is to shop with a purpose. So you're not really actually putting your hand in your pocket to then make that extra donation. It's something that you're doing every day. And if you're like recommending products to your friends and family, you get paid in cash, and that cash you wouldn't have had, and then you can choose to then donate it if you want through the platform to any one of the charities on that. So I think, I mean, we also see that the millennials and Gen Z they do donate. And as I said earlier in the conversation, that I was quite surprised that the more mature group of our users actually didn't donate and the younger ones did. And I think it's, again, going back to the flexibility around the amount they can donate, the ease at which they can donate it, and, you know, to Rachel's point, whether it is 50 pence, £5 or 500,000, the fulfillment that you get out of giving back is actually emotionally, you know, you feel good about it. So I think when we were building the platform, we did have this conversation about how are people going to, the younger generation, are they really going to want to put their hand in their pocket and donate? But then the way our platform is structured, they're actually only donating out of the money that they've made. So, yeah.
Thank you. And David, what are your thoughts about encouraging millennials and Gen Z?
Yeah, I mean, I hear this sort of characteristics of people of a certain age group, and I have a saying that millennial is a mindset, not necessarily an age thing. And I think it's wrong just to characterize young people in one group and old people in another. And actually, there's a lot of, you know, some of the most digital people I know in the world are actually retired. because they have so much time on their hands to play and experiment with everything. So I think we've got to be careful about these characterizations. It's interesting listening to the stats there about how young people give versus old. You know, I do think, having watched The Social Dilemma on Netflix a few days ago, and if you haven't seen it, then you probably have to watch it, but I'm just going to give you a health warning that it's really deeply disturbing and scary, about how the social platforms have basically created the world's tobacco to entice young people into addiction on these social platforms. You know, I think this is a really important topic on a number of areas, not least how do charities you know, work with these social platforms and engage with them at a time when they're going to come under huge scrutiny. They are in the US right now. I think there's going to be some social backlash against them, and I think probably about time too, when you watch the film, if you haven't seen it, you appreciate why the founders of these companies have actually stopped their kids going onto the social platforms, right? That tells you something. So having several young children myself and trying to encourage them to actually spend less than a few hours a day on a mobile phone, you know, the more I can attract them to areas where they're getting out in the community, doing real things with real people. I'm a sponsor of Greenhouse, which is a charity that helps train young people in sport and gets them, you know, off the mobile phones and actually interacting in a physical way. You know, we've also got to sort of, you know, help our young people not just be, you know, immersed completely in these digital environments. We've got to give them some help as well, because I do worry that the tobacco disease that we've created in the last few years from these platforms is going to affect them for a lifetime. And we've got to look at that, and then charities are going to play a role as well. You know, how do they engage with these social platforms? We all know the power of Facebook and Twitter, the thing that they've created, and give someone an escape outside. You know, I think some of the best work that charities do is do real work in the community with, you know, contact with people. And unfortunately, in the COVID environment, it's all ground to a halt. And so that is something that I really worry about, because we didn't grow up as kids spending, you know, 6 hours a day on a mobile phone. And I worry that the kids that are growing up now are going to have some effect of doing that. Now, maybe I'm one of the older generations that tends to get scared about new technology, but actually, please watch the film and you'll probably share, you'll be aligned with what I think as well.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, definitely. Highly recommend that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, time has whistled by, probably because we're having so much fun. So this is going to be my last question for you all. So Bonnie, let's start with you. And the question is, what advice would you give to Gosh for implementing new products? So fundraising products.
Digital products, I'm assuming. I think it's really making sure that you have really thought through the value proposition in terms of, you know, what is it outside of course, raising the money. How are you going to really deliver the heart and the soul of Gosh? Because personally, I think, you know, Gosh is a phenomenal charity. And when we first partnered with Gosh, I was lucky enough to walk through and see all the work that's being done there. And it's not until you go and walk the corridors of Gosh and go into the chapel and see everything for yourself in terms of what goes on there, the hard work, the commitment, the passion, the kindness, the nurturing of the children. And I think that's going to be a challenge. How do you deliver that proposition digitally? And that's what I would focus on, because it's just a brilliant, fantastic organization. And yeah, I would very much focus on getting that.
Excellent. David, same question to you.
I mean, I agree with Bonnie. When I went to the hospital and went to the school, I was just blown away. And I think my advice would be help people experience what Gosh really is and what it does, which is help sick children get better and keep to the core. My second piece of advice is look for partnerships. It's an amazing brand. But actually in this environment where you're competing with so many things, you know, there are great partners out there you can work with, be they platform providers of the payments platform, or they be other brands that actually are in exactly the same space that Gosh is around children. That would be my advice. I think the digital part is really good, but stick to the knitting of helping people understand what Gosh does, and then it'll appeal to people's heart of why they're giving.
Thank you. Rachel?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with everything you guys just said. Just to add on top of those things, you definitely want to think about fundraising online as similarly to how you fundraise in person, which is to storytell. And sometimes it feels weird to think about it in that context when you're making a digital platform, because inherently digital platforms feel transactional and not a place to storytell, because you're not in person to tell that story. But I would challenge you to, when you're building, think about how you can storytell in a very delightful way. Whether that be specific stories throughout that people can interact with and click through, or give towards specific programs that tangibly online you can feel what's happening and you can click into each one and it's a whole new experience. So I would definitely just encourage you to figure out how to storytell through that, what feels like normally just a transactional experience, and then how to create delight throughout. So like a delightful moment in design is something that, like, you know, sparks everything in you. And it makes you just smile. So like, what are those moments? You don't need to have a million of them, you know, one or two throughout the experience, but whatever those are, they're going to make just a one-time donor turn into a recurring donor. And so that's what's really important.
Excellent, thank you. Well, unfortunately, it's whizzed past, but I'd like to say a huge thank you to our panelists. It's been really interesting discussions. We've managed to cover a lot of topics. So panelists, if you don't mind just waiting on the line for a couple of minutes, and we'll say thank you and goodbye to all the attendees, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you all.
Bye.
We'll just wait for the participants. I can see them all dropping off now. Thank you so much, guys. I really enjoyed that. I could have talked to you for another 3 hours. I hope you enjoyed that too, and such a vast array of experience that we managed to tap into there. So thank you so much for your time and for your support for the charity. As you all said, it's an amazing work at. But
yeah, thank you, and nice to meet you, Bonnie and Rachel. It's really interesting. It's like we might be different businesses, but we actually think pretty much the same.
Yeah. True.
Well, when I grow up, I want to be you, David.
Yes.
I
want
to open one of these conversations saying I have offices in 190 countries.
I haven't grown up yet. I'm just playing with my toys still. It was very nice to meet you. Thank you, Nina, as well. I hope you're successful.
yeah, thank you so much, guys.
Thank you very
Bye.
much. Pleasure. Bye-bye. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.
Stay safe.
Bye-bye.
Bye, thanks.